Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Me personally, I would pick an early lunch over any conference talk, so I really appreciate that you guys all are here to listen to me talking about three heads of quality, a tale about how different people see quality in companies from small to big, and what to do to always win. So in case you're wondering who I am and what I'm doing here, just like the cow, my name is Ilya Fomin, and I'm the speaker. A few facts. I spent about 8 years in testing. This is actually where I started my career. And if you look really hard, you can probably find some of my older talks from this conference. Overall, I spent about 12 years in software engineering. So after testing, I switched to DevOps and just overall software development. I've been a CTO. And about 10 years of my career I spent in various management roles. Most recently, I've been running my own startup called Oscillations, doing VR that's mind-controlled, and joined Google about a month ago. So disclaimer, anything that I'm talking about is my personal ideas, not representative of Google. And I didn't really have too much time to learn from them, so if 1 month is not enough and you're hoping to hear my Google experience, you can leave now. All right, so overall, I've been through various sizes of companies in my career. I started at A4 Vision, which they raised about $27 million about 15 years ago, kind of like a big deal at that point, but ran out of money pretty quickly. After that, I went with Align Technology, that's the company that makes Invisalign plastic braces. It was the fastest growing company in 2017 among S&P 500. After that, went to join a dental startup called Dentist, kind of like Uber for dental implants. Not super sexy, but it was a fun company. And then started my own thing, Oscillations, which is at this point, pre-funding. So it's a very, very early stage startup. And at the same point, I joined YouTube, which is in itself a fairly small company, about 5,000 people. But it's also part of the bigger Google, which is pretty much as big as you can go. So as you can see, I like the extreme parts of the spectrum. And so why I'm doing this talk? When I worked in one of the startups after fixing yet another bug in production that crashed everything, I was just like, maybe it's time to write some auto tests. I've been writing my auto tests for a long time. And one of my colleagues, I'm not going to call any names, said, oh, it's too early. We're not some kind of an enterprise. We need to deliver features, not really write tests. It's too early. I was just like, And has anybody heard something like that before? Like, we don't have time to write auto tests, we're too small. Show of hands. OK, so some people have been there. Congratulations. And I was just like, I heard that before somewhere. That other bigger company I worked for, I talked to a developer and I said, hey, you have a really big, complicated system, let's write auto tests maybe. And he's like, it's too late. We have this legacy code. We've been manually testing the system for a while. We're not some kind of a startup to write automated tests, And has anybody heard that before? Same people. Some of them said same people. Interesting. And I was just like, this doesn't make any sense, right? So why would you even use a company size as an excuse? And in both cases, by the way, I did write automated tests because I know they work. And can the same quality approaches be used across different sizes of companies, different types of companies? And how do you even agree on a quality process if somebody like that saying, we don't need auto tests? How do you come to a conclusion and a good process? And is my experience from previous companies relevant here in the new company? So these are the questions that I'm hoping to answer during this talk. So I started to look into size of companies. So there are typically, in different business literature, 4 to 5 to 6 stages in company development, company growth, or product development, kind of the same thing. Typically, it's startup, growing, kind of like enterprise, and decline. So let's look into this kind of like 4 sizes of companies, and I named them a little differently. I'll tell you why a little later. So the first stage I wanted to call building, but then realized that building is not really the first stage. It's kind of like a 0 stage. When you have an idea for a company or a product, you kind of like think about it before you go to sleep. You work at it at nights, during weekends, you talk to your friends a lot about that. But at this point, you don't have the company yet. It's just like yourself thinking about that idea. So when you start a company, you kind of like need to shape all this energy towards in a productive way to create something that customers, somebody would really want to use or hopefully pay for. And in a startup, you can work on 100 different things, and it's really critical at the first stage to create something that people want to buy. So you typically operate with bootstrap, your own money, your own time. Maybe you got some seed stage, maybe you joined an accelerator. It might be just yourself or maybe a few of your friends working on this. And the goal of this stage really is to find product market fit. So find something that people really want to get. So you kind of like try to build a prototype together. You try to show it to people, maybe like create a website, and iterate on that until you finally start getting like emails and calls and people telling you, I want to get this thing now. Please give it to me. And it's just like, and this is when product market fit clicks. So you have found something that you can build or sell that people are going to use. So at this point, you graduate from this stage and you start growing. It's maybe you raise some more money, Series A, Series B, maybe like $10 million. In Silicon Valley, it's not too much. You hire more people, like 10, 20 employees, maybe up to 100 eventually. And a goal here is to kind of like mature your product. So now you're going to replace this cloud-based machine learning super smart systems that actually had been you kind of like working with a data set manually all along. So now you replace it with actual machine learning. And as you mature your product, you also get more customers. And that's kind of like a self-reinforcing circle. The better your product is, the more customers you get, and then you have a little more money maybe to create a better product. And you iterate on that until you really have like a robust product that's kind of works on autopilot. So you can actually grow more and more and more without doing more and more and more work. So hopefully you get more customers than you do work eventually. And after you have this autopilot running product, you're finally ready for the next stage, which is you replicate. So you have this product and you just start putting it in different markets, different geographies for different demographics. Maybe you create a few different products for different pricing tiers so that you can actually cover all the kinds of customers that you have. And at this point, you get more and more money. Maybe you go for IPO eventually. You get thousands of employees at this point. And the goal is to become mainstream. So ultimately, you want to make sure that every single person that has this problem that you're solving knows about your product at least. And ideally uses it and pays you money for it. And you don't stop until that happens. That's kind of like how business works. And you want to satisfy all the demand. So if you have like a million customers that want to work with you, you have to build a system that can handle 1 million customers. And you don't stop until every single person is ultimately covered. So you have this product that everybody knows and loves. Is that a nirvana, you think? Not quite. At this point, you don't really have much more to gain, but you have all of that to lose. So you try to sustain what you have. At this point, you're probably running on revenue because there's not really many different ways to raise capital after you go IPO. So certainly you need to depend on revenue. And you have tens of thousands of employees, maybe 100,000. So that's a lot of people, and you want to make sure that you stay in business so that they still have a job. And everybody wants to sue you for something, so you really you have to protect your business now, protect your position. And you do incremental improvements because the competition is already there because of your success. They know that they want to jump into the same market. And many companies start creating new products and new segments of business, kind of like trying to be everything for everyone. Like an example would be like Microsoft, for instance. They could say, "Oh, do you like our fancy operating system on our new computer? You can browse web on the edge, or maybe you want to edit some spreadsheets. We have that really good spreadsheet software. Maybe you want to buy that." Well, if you don't like spreadsheets, maybe you get an Xbox. You can play video games. You can like watch Blu-rays. What do you don't even own a phone. Damn it. But we all know that if Microsoft could sell us a phone, they certainly would sell us a phone. And speaking about selling, like something like Amazon, they would literally sell you everything and anything, and pretty much the same thing for Apple. And I can absolutely not comment about Google, obviously. So we have 4 sizes of companies: shaping, growing, replicating, sustaining. And this is kind of like the framework we're going to be working with as we analyze this kind of company. So now let's talk about the quality. What is quality? If I want to learn about what something is, I go to the source of truth on the internet, which is Wikipedia. Wikipedia tells us that quality is a measurement of non-inferiority or superiority and fitness for purpose. Wikipedia also tells us that quality may be understood differently by different people. There's a bunch of other texts, but TLDR, it's a measurement of how well the product fits the purpose. And it's subjective and relative. So this is kind of like the 2 main components that Wikipedia gives us. And I like this approach. Yeah, so it's certainly subjective. So now we're talking about the quality process. Consumer of quality process is not really the consumer, it's the company itself. So if you're talking about the purpose, it would be kind of like related to the company. So you want to think not just about how your product fits your customer needs, which is very, very important, but also how your product fits the company needs, or maybe how your product fits the company needs so that your product fits the customer needs so that it also fits the company needs. Because if your product does not fit your company needs, your company is gonna stop making it, because that's kind of like how the business works. So it has to work for both sides. And in order to make it easy, I really wish that we knew the purpose of the company. That would be super cool, and we would know the purpose of the company, and we can define what quality is. Does anybody have any ideas what the purpose of the company might be? Yeah, but maybe something more detailed. Maybe something we discussed recently. Maybe it depends on the size of the company. Anybody? Okay. So some companies have the goal of shaping, growing, replicating, and sustaining, and this is why certain things like auto tests get controversial, because when I propose an auto test, maybe the person I'm talking to thinking that I'm trying to sustain the business, but we don't have anything to sustain. We need to shape, and I think this is critical in order to agree on quality, to take that into account. So this is the first part of the equation about the fitness for purpose. Now let's talk about subjective and relative and how we deal with that. Well, show of hands, do you think subjective is a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing? Bad thing? Kind of like half and half, okay. So, it can be both sides, obviously. I really think in this scope that subjective is great. And I'll tell you why. Objective is really hard to achieve. So, because I'm a person, you're a person, when we're talking, it's really hard for us to be objective. So we need to invent some committees, and maybe that would be biased and not very objective. So it's really hard to prove that something is objective. However, subjective, you can certainly work with. One thing that kind of like led me to that conclusion is my work with Adi, who was my former coworker. So he was a really, really talented software architect, and I observed his work. It's always been incredible. And it wasn't incredible just because he came up with like really good scalable architectures, but also because all his architectures were really, like nobody would argue against them. So it was like a really easy to agree on them. And the way he did it, and he talks about that in this conference talk that's linked, is he basically just talked to people, understood them, addressed their concerns, respected them, these kind of things. And I really saw that at work, and that was incredible. So I really think that talking to people is the key to define this kind of architectures, and also define some kind of processes as well. So companies do consist of people. So ultimately, if you can convince all the people within the company, you have convinced the company, and that's sort of the only way to do it. And every decision was typically made by someone or a group of people. And if you get all the right people on board, you can really achieve great results like this fancy turnip up there. And people are not that hard, at least at work. Everybody's a personality, obviously, but at work we're all kind of simple. We like to do what we're good at, And it works the other way too. We're good at what we like to do. You do something, you're good at it. People say, yo, that's cool. And you're like, oh, I like it. I'm going to do more of that. As you do more of that, you become better. That's kind of like self-reinforcing circle. People don't want to get fired. Maybe you want to leave your company, but you wouldn't be really looking forward to a conversation with your boss saying, get your stuff and get away because we don't like you anymore. So people typically want to be good at their jobs. People typically agree with their own decision. If you don't agree with your own decisions, go see a doctor. And I would argue most people are lazy. Even I think even the workaholics among them, and I've been there, are just trying to get all the work done so that they can kind of like slack tomorrow. It's just nobody told them that you can never get all the work done. So if you have two different ways to achieve the same result, and one of them is easy and the other one is hard, people would typically go with the easy route. And that's reasonable. So now that we know how people work, let's talk about actual quality and the three kinds of people that I want to introduce that we are going to be working with. Three different roles. So the first of them is product lead, product manager, PM, whatever you call it, kind of like somebody who represents the business. So that's certainly the king, or as we call them in Russia, the tsar. And so what does the tsar do? He talks to everyone, like he likes everyone, well, hopefully everyone likes them as well. If they decide what work gets done, what work doesn't get done, knows the business, and most importantly, they know the customer. So they represent the customer in this, in your development process, and they, most certainly wear the crown. The other kind of personality here is development lead. He's like, at the night. So he likes to solve problems. So if you have a problem, you call for like a knight, and it's just like, oh, do you have a problem here? I'm going to solve it, right? And they typically like to move fast, hence the horse. And they're typically not very good at talking. So most engineers I know would rather talk to machines than they would talk to real people. That's kind of like how engineers work. That's why we need product managers. And last but not least, obviously, so they wear the helmet. Last but not least is the quality lead, the princess. Not quite the king, but also very important, everybody likes them. So they ensure that everything works as it should. They look for defects, kind of like a little picky sometimes. And they approve good work, even though, I have to admit, most of the stuff they work with makes them cry, and I'm so sorry for that. And they wear this frontlet thing, which is not quite a crown, but kind of close. And I also want to talk about Zmei Gorynych. Who here knows about Zmei Gorynych? Okay, most people know, okay. So for the ones who don't know, it's kind of like a hybrid between Hydra and Bowser from Mario. He's always up to no good. And TLDR on him, so he has 3 heads. Each of them is not particularly smart, but what he lacks in smarts, he makes up in firepower. He also only has one S, single S. So if one of the heads makes a bad decision and lights the fire under the S, 2 other heads also suffer. And pro tip, if you ever get to fight Zmei Gorynych, don't go for the heads, they grow back. Go for the vulnerable part. I mean the heart, obviously. So Zmei Gorynych is kind of how I felt working at a startup. You wear many hats, and I particularly wore the PM, the dev, and the QA head myself. And kind of like had to weight all the decisions from all the 3 perspectives. Pretty, right? And so I kind of learned how to make decisions weighting from all the 3 sides, and that really creates sustainable processes. So after I started doing that in bigger companies, I kind of realized it's very important to get this consensus, and kind of like this is what I feel is the key to create good processes and quality particularly. So at this point, you're probably thinking, Ilya, you've been literally talking about fairy tales for 20 minutes. Give us some real-world examples, okay? And yeah, that's coming. I actually think that it's quite easy to explain this framework with a few examples. So let's talk about automated testing that I already brought up. And I want to start not with explaining how to do automated testing here, but explaining why to do that to all the three key stakeholders so that we get an agreement that's an important thing, and then we decide how this gets done. So automated testing is fairly easy, everybody does that. But for PM, it ensures that customer needs are addressed consistently, so every single build you deliver would have all the scenarios passing, and that's easy to prove and see. For dev, it's a problem, right? So for developers, it's just writing code for test or not for test is kind of the same thing, pretty much, so they never mind doing that. And for QA, it obviously helps prevent bugs so they don't cry as much. And now, hopefully this is good enough to convince your stakeholders that automated testing is the right thing to do. So the next step of the process is to evaluate all the different kinds of automated testing, all the different approaches, and select what's good for your company. And what's good for your company, as we remember, is the fitness for purpose. This is like what resonates best with the purpose of the company at this stage. So for instance, come on, click. Yes, for a shaping company, you at least want to add like a single test or a couple of tests that test the customer flow, from going through from acquisition channel to kind of like subscribing to your updates or maybe to buying your service, whatever you have working at that point. So you want to make sure consistently that this particular thing works, and that's a good start already. And so that you don't puzzle the customers with not working system. As you grow, you at least want to add more tests for bugs, so every bug you find, especially if it's like occurred multiple times, you certainly want to write an additional test for that bug so that your company can scale, because if you don't do that, you just get more and more bugs and you cannot develop anymore. It's just like, this at least helps you grow. If you're like in the replicate phase already pretty late, you can add behavior-driven tests or something that kind of maps every test to every feature, so that at the very least, your PM can see which features are covered, which features are not covered. At some point, you might not be able to fix every single test for every single build, so you would be able to do some risk analysis on, this feature is affected, this feature is not affected, so kind of like weight the risks and see what build you want to release for customers, depending on the features that might not be working. And add performance tests also to kind of like be able to scale worldwide. And in sustain phase, at this point, you like really care about every single customer you have. You don't want to lose them, because if your stuff does not work, they go to a competition. So at this point, you add full regression suite. You also add security and compliance training so that you don't get like, private data of the customers leaked. Kind of Facebook likes to do that thing. Most companies don't. And failure testing so that if one of the data center goes down, you still operate, and that's very important and kind of expensive too. And one thing I want to add here is, if you're like in later stage, like replicate or sustain, you still want to do the early things too. And in early things, you might be able to do the later things. If you have time, certainly do that. But the key thing here is, I try to structure it so that at every single stage, it's like crystal clear for all the stakeholders why this work would help the business purpose. So let's look into a couple of more examples. So customer research, a really fun activity to do. And for PM, it helps understand customer segments and needs. Different segments might have different needs, and customer research helps you shape that. For dev, it helps understand where the problems are, so that they have more problems to solve. And for QA, it helps structure testing. So ultimately, you typically write test cases after the use cases or after you see how your customers use the software to be able to test all this pass. And you prioritize what they do more in the testing so that you test that earlier and more often. Hopefully clear. Come on, click. So the first thing you do for like a shape company is you just ask your friends to use your software, give you feedback, right? That's free typically. If you don't have any friends, you can like buy a stranger on the street coffee and ask them to give you feedback. That's kind of like how Silicon Valley works. Later on, when you're growing, you can do an early access test so that you don't let all the customers in at once. You only, you can control how many customers you accept in the early test, and then you get feedback from there. And as you fix the issues that you're facing, you can actually expand and get more people in and kind of control this without overwhelming your system. So this really helps you grow and scale your solution. when you're in replicate phase, you can hopefully afford to run marketing studies because you want to serve every particular kind of customer. And kind of like marketing agencies help you get like a diverse group of people to give you feedback, and you can see which kind of customers you're serving well, maybe which particular demographics is not served well, and you want to improve your product here so that it goes mainstream. And in Sustain, you probably have all the kinds of users in the system already, so you can just test on them, maybe get some metrics, and understand whether changes you do impact them and whether it's improving their experience or not. Product metrics, also kind of like a standard thing that everybody does now, but it's very hard to do all of that at once. So benefits for PM helps ensure that customers use the service, customers use the features that they expected to be used in production, right? For dev, it enables fast experimentation with less talking to people. So, and a very famous example is the Amazon rollout of the feature. Customers also look at this as a product on the page with every product. That particular feature, in case you haven't heard, was specifically rolled out with a disapproval from a director. Engineer just did that at night, and he collected metrics that showed we get 7% more sales with that. And kind of like, you're wrong, and I have the data to prove that I'm right. And so now most companies actually use data-driven approach and A/B testing to roll out new features and experiments. And for testing, it helps identify where to look for problems. So if a particular product metric drops, like for instance, we have a lot of inflow traffic, but we don't have too many sales, or that particular thing is not being bought anymore, maybe it kind of like got lost on the website or something. So you can actually see where the problems might be, and you make sure that you do more robust testing around those. So for a shape phase, you don't really have too much of a product yet potentially, but you certainly have some customer acquisition channels, and you have landing pages, you have Google ads, Facebook ads, whatever, service ads, and you at least want to track whether the users are coming from that channel, kind of like the top of the funnel, and you want to measure that part to kind of like tweak your landing pages, tweak your ads, to understand what customers want to buy. So, and it's very common to sell something that doesn't exist in small companies and big companies as well. So by tweaking what you are trying to sell and measuring that, you can actually understand what would actually be a good product to sell. And you can check new daily users. That's typically a fairly easy thing to measure. A customer clicks on the buy button or like learn more button, whatever that is, and at least you can measure that. That's not very hard. In a bigger company, when you're growing, you want to measure total users of the service, daily, monthly, hourly, whatever that is, whatever you call a user, maybe different kinds of users, and also number of sales. Ultimately, how many people bought your product. It might be, they paid for it, maybe they subscribed for a free trial, maybe it's just like they sent 3 messages in your free messaging app and you know that they are an engaged customer now. But that kind of like helps you gauge whether your business is growing and how many customers you have so that you can show that metrics to raise more money and that kind of thing, and also to measure quality, obviously. In replicate phase, you want to already have like a complete tracking of customer journey. So every single path they can take in the app or the website, page to page, see where users drop. Maybe you have like a bug on a page that drops the traffic there. That's not very easy to do, which is why I put that replicate phase, but it's really essential. And you can, if you should certainly respect user privacy, but if you happen to have some demographics data about them, like maybe if they input date of birth in their profile, you also want to track on that so that you can understand which customer demographics are more successful and less successful in using your product. In order to make it mainstream, you want to improve those people who are struggling, experience for those people who are struggling. And in sustain, you might have multiple products at the sustain phase. So just tracking a customer journey in an isolated product might not be the right metric. Like for instance, you release a new product that's cannibalizing your old product, but you want to measure kind of like overall, and if the gains you have in the new product are more than the loss of the other product, then you're overall still successful. And this might be like an important additional metric to have beyond just the customer journeys. And you obviously want to measure financials because you depend on revenue. customer feedback. Hopefully pretty clear as well. For PM, it's their job to understand customers, so any customer feedback is what they thrive upon. For developers, it identifies, again, more problems to work with. Whatever customer complains about typically is a high priority for developers to fix. And for QA, customers kind of do a little bit of their job, and because everybody's lazy, nobody minds getting more feedback from customer. Oh, no. Yeah, so ultimately, QA gets a lot of value from customer feedback. So for shape stage companies, you maybe have like a few users, and for each user, certainly records their feedback, follow up with them in person, let them know, ask them more questions, whether you understand the problem correctly, maybe let them know that the problem got resolved, and see if it really got resolved for them, because maybe you did it wrong. As you're growing, this is not scalable, obviously, right? So as you're growing, you need to structure the feedback to be able to identify the themes and prioritize the things that affect a lot of customers over things that affect 1 or 2 customers only. And you cannot follow up in person with everybody anymore, so you do satisfaction surveys, kind of like very easy tool to do. In Replicate phase, it's not only important to serve your current customers well, but also the new markets that you're trying to expand into. So you might do things like collect community ideas and see what products you don't have that might be helpful for the customers you don't serve right now, and prioritize on that to make sure that you can serve all the customers that can be helped by your solution. You can do aggregate reviews from things like app stores. Maybe scan Reddit and see whether Reddit has any discussions of your service, to kind of like have higher level understanding of how you're doing overall. And you can do beta testing, particularly useful in new markets. Again, kind of like a early access thing that we discussed earlier. It just helps you get feedback from the new types of customers that you never served before without, if that product doesn't work very well, you might lose their trust overall if you don't do like that staged rollout. For bigger companies, you want to do things like bug bounties, so that white hat hackers would identify vulnerabilities or bugs, critical bugs in your code, and instead of exposing it to the public or stealing your customers' data, they would get some small payment from you so that you don't spend a lot more money fixing the PR disaster. And you want to do customer support metrics, like overall for all your products, how many customer calls you have, or chats, or whatever that is, how many people feel that they got a good answer from you, and how much time you're spending maintaining. So if you have a particular issue, you can actually measure the impact on quality impact by tracking the customer support metrics. And you also want to introduce enterprise support at some point, which is pretty much the same thing as at the shape stage, very high personal follow-ups and things like that, but for your bigger customers, customers that your business depends on. So in order to sustain it, you need to make sure that you're providing very good customer support experience for them. So they're just like a few examples that I was able to fit into this presentation. But at this point, you're thinking, there's just like a few things, and I have a lot more things I'm thinking about, and you promised me to tell me how to always win, and this is coming, don't worry about it. And so I thought about that a lot, how I shape these processes and how I involve different kinds of people, and maybe I could develop a formula that really describes quality objectively, and so that we can measure impact of different quality practices on our software. And so I came up with something, and I just wanted to share it with you and see what you're thinking. So the drum roll, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, SQA edition. So quality equals number of customers. That's it. No, just kidding. Number of customers times number of problems that you solve over the problems that customers have overall, and times the success rate of using your service. So ultimately, how it works is, the number of customers, the more customers you have, the more markets you serve, the better your product is typically. Like if you can serve thousands of customers, it's probably a better product than if you can serve one customer. So hopefully that's clear. And then number of problems you solve if your product doesn't solve a problem, it's not a good product for that problem. Hopefully pretty clear. So we can improve that by solving another problem for a customer, or maybe introducing all new problems altogether, kind of like how Apple introduced, the smartphone problem of viewing, desktop-grade internet on the phone, and now everybody has this problem, and Apple is the only one who's serving it at that point, was serving that like 10 years ago, and this is why they kind of like bump this ratio a little bit. And the success rate is, if you have a bug in your code, your code crashes, you cannot solve this problem, right? So your customer would either solve that problem with your competitor, or just, decide to not solve that problem at all at this point. Either way, your quality drops here. So hopefully that's pretty clear. And there are two reasons why I like this formula. I think it works. First, it's really hard to find a counterexample that shows that an objective increase to quality does not move the needle on this equation. And the second part is because these are actually three components that represent the three heads. So we have the number of customers, which is something that the PM is professional with, or the TAR, problems that developers solve, and the success rate, which is ultimately what QA quality people measure. So let me know what you think, and hopefully that's helpful. Once again, I recommend that every quality policy you introduce, you take these three heads into account, and you also take the goal of your company into account based on what stage it is on. And yeah, I hope that it helps you live happily ever after. This is it. Oh, this question is going to be hard.
Questions?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the talk. And
what's your name?
My name's Nick, so I think you know it, but still, yeah. Hi, everyone. So I think that your contents of your talk actually have all the components of the good framework, like CMMI, TMMI, and stuff. So you have a great taxonomy, you have great words and namings, so you have a cool formula that makes your customer feel safe, but you actually can do everything with this formula, so to make them feel safe or unsafe. So my question is, when you will sell assessments of compliance to your framework to different companies, and probably what are your thoughts, what's missing, and what you still need to introduce to your framework to start consultancy assessments and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think for the consulting business, thanks for the feedback. So you will be my first customer. I appreciate that. I think I would still be at the shape process, so I would need to understand to build some quality metrics around how many customers want to use this product, and I'll start with that, and maybe try to suggest a few offerings, see which ones people want to buy, and if a lot of people want to buy, I actually move to the next stage, to grow and replicate and sustain. Hopefully, I'll outplace Gartner, in a few years. Yeah, that's my plan.
Okay, thanks.
More questions? No more questions? Ah.
Ilya, can you go back to the slide where everybody lived happier and ever after?
Okay, I will do that if you introduce yourself in the mic.
Alexander.
Okay, thank you. Which slide?
I suppose it was the last one or pre-last?
This one?
No?
This one?
Yeah, this one.
Uh-huh.
Is it an Easter egg in your presentation where three geezers are? Like it's a quote or something?
That's a good question. Actually, the Easter egg is we have three very happy QA leads here, in three different frontlets. So I was hoping that you would be all the happy QA leads.
What is the cachet бессмертный in this situation?
Huh, interesting. That's something you still need to target. It's probably the competition, fierce competition.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you to everybody. We are out of time. Please, can you give a ticket for a t-shirt to somebody?
Sure. Does anybody have a counterexample for my quality formula? Oh, okay. Can I hear it? Counterexample. Can we get the mic to the person? This gentleman over there. Can you raise your hand?
Okay.
No, can you give them a mic? Please introduce yourself.
I'm Alex. Thank
Alex.
you for your attention and thank you for your speech. Can I ask you how can I provide automation in the small startup company if my superior don't want to do that? You know, they think that in our company all okay, and it is problem, I think. But I think that in the future we can to get a new stage of our quality.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the size of the company. You want to start small, and you want to make sure that you identify these three heads in your organization. Somebody who represents the business and the customer, somebody who represents the development overall, somebody who represents quality assurance, and you explain them why test automation is important. And this is stage 0. Until you get an agreement there, it would be really hard for you to do anything. And after you convince them, that would be very easy. And then you just identify the stage of your company. You can follow my steps here, and start with one single test. I guess that's what you should do first.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Everybody's free. Go get lunch. Thank you.